You can clearly see the real image of a small 6-year-old boy who has been unalived, their body cut open. Who had done this? Where did those photos of unalived children come from? A secret, lost episode of SpongeBob SquarePants could possibly exist. One that's not only creepy, but heavily disturbing, causing multiple people to quit their jobs. Some even ended up in the hospital. It isn't uncommon for writers, producers, and people working on shows to come together and watch their latest episode or a mock-up of a future episode. And in 2005, animators, editors, and producers all came together to watch what they assumed would be the premiere of the 4th season of their favorite cartoon on television. At this point in time, VHS tapes were one of the main ways to watch these episodes, and after storyboarding was complete, the tape was sent to Burbank, California. The tape arrived in the middle of the night to a team of sound editors and lead animators. They gathered into the viewing room. The lights went dark and the projector lit up. Every episode begins the same. A title card with the name of the episode. It gives you a quick idea of what the episode might be about, and they're usually harmless. The team believed that they were going to see an episode titled Fear of a Krabby Patty, but instead, this episode was called Squidward's Suicide. Everyone in the room looked around at each other, eyebrows raised, but laughing nonetheless. They all just assumed this was a silly prank and nothing more. The episode started like any normal episode would. A view of Conch Street, Patrick's Rock, SpongeBob's Pineapple, and Squidward's Maui Head. The typical cutesy, tropical-themed music playing in the background, slowly zooming in closer to the street. We're brought into view of Squidward's house, where Squidward stands next to his clarinet and pretends he's about to perform for a large crowd, his favorite thing to do. Just outside, SpongeBob and Patrick are frolicking around, laughing their big laughs, and ultimately annoying Squidward as he tries to focus on his hobby. Once he can't stand them anymore, he shouts out that he's practicing for a very important clarinet concert taking place that evening. He can't concentrate with all the noise. SpongeBob apologizes, and the screen quickly cuts to the concert hall. It's entirely packed with an audience who have come to watch Squidward play his music. He finishes playing his song when the sound completely cuts out. The audience looks at him, and after a moment, their eyes turn bloodshot red and they start to boo him off of the stage. What's interesting about this clip is that SpongeBob can be seen booing Squidward as well, which is very unlike his character to do. In normal episodes of SpongeBob, he treats Squidward as though the two are best friends, despite Squidward not liking him. But in this episode, he turns his back on him and joins the rest of the crowd. The camera cuts back to Squidward standing on stage, horrified and embarrassed. His dream is to be the next big musician, and this is essentially his worst nightmare come true. After this, we cut to Squidward back at his home, sitting on his bed in the dark. It's obvious that he's crushed from the reaction to his performance. After sitting quietly for some time, contemplating his life, he begins to sob heavily. He curls himself into a ball and cries, tears flowing from his eyes, for what seems like forever. Throughout each of his cries, a deep, haunting voice can be heard. It's unclear if this voice is laughing at Squidward or crying with him. Regardless, it sounds almost demonic. On top of this, the sound of trees blowing in the forest from heavy winds is layered on top. At this point, the audience in the viewing room was super confused. The storyline wasn't making much sense and honestly was really sad. It's hard seeing a character you love go through something so embarrassing. Then, out of nowhere, a quick flash of an image popped up on the screen. It was too quick to tell what it could have been in the moment, but it was clearly in black and white, while the rest of the show is in bright, saturated color. If you were to slow the speed of the episode down to 0.25, you can clearly see the real image of a small 6-year-old boy who has been unalived, their body cut open. Ultimately, one of the editors, who was just as shocked as everyone else about what they were seeing, got up and rewound the tape to catch what had just flashed on their screen. No one was prepared for that gory image, and immediately everyone started to panic. When the screen cut back from the flash, Squidward's head was covered in slashes of blood, while the sound of a thunderstorm can be heard. It's unclear if there's an actual thunderstorm occurring, as they are under the ocean, But this wouldn't be super far off from the other weird occurrences in the show. All of a sudden, another quick flash pops up across the screen. Again, in real time, the audience couldn't make out what it was, but slowed down, it's clear as day. This time, a 6-year-old girl, also unalive and horrifically disfigured. The crying continued for several minutes, when out of nowhere, it jumps to Squidward's face. He covers his eyes with his tentacles, but the sides are pouring blood still. He screams a blood-curdling scream, and when he removes his tentacles, it's revealed that his eyes are bloodshot red. They look identical to the eyes of the audience members from the concert, except this time, his slowly spurts out blood. The viewing room was sick to their stomachs. Who had done this? Who had edited this tape? Where did those photos of unalive children come from? Was this just some sick prank that went too far? But the tape wasn't over just yet. Then Squidward begins to scream at the top of his lungs once again, and after each exhale, his eyes begin to quickly spew blood. This portion of the episode goes on for what feels like a never-ending amount of time. The screams, the cries, they only get louder and more intense as it goes on. All of a sudden, a short sequence of images are flashed onto the screen. Again, too quick to make out what was being shown in real time. When slowed down, you can see a hand flashing onto the screen, reaching out to another small child. The hand lunges forward and reaches into the chest of the small child. Shortly after, the hand is holding what appears to be an eyeball, but unlike most of the eyes during this episode, it isn't bloodshot. It looks completely normal. However, the eyeball is removed from the boy's head and resting in the hand. At the last minute, you can catch the removed eyeball blink once, twice. At this point, everyone in the room was completely horrified and knew that they had to stop the tape. This episode wasn't even the same length as a normal episode, but the contents were enough. Everyone agreed that the creator of the show needed to come in, and he wasn't in the viewing party. He quickly ran across town after hearing the panic in everyone's voices. He arrived, still majorly confused as to what he was hearing, but decided to watch the tape with the rest of his crew. They started the tape up again. The next image quickly returns to Squidward, and the last of the blood shoots from his eyes. Then an ear-piercing violin screech is played, and we watch as Squidward now has a gun, specifically a shotgun. The next image is incredibly disturbing. We see Squidward sitting on his bed, shotgun pointed directly into his mouth. With his eyes fully open, he cocks the gun and fires. After this, a horrific scene is left. It's bloody, gruesome, and just downright scary. The episode ends with Squidward's body being blown back by the force, legs in the air, and an unidentified gory object hanging where his head should be. Blood is splattered on the wall behind him, and blood drips from the bed. When slowed down, you can hear the sound of the fluid dripping and hitting the floor. The final image is Squidward's mangled body strewn across his bed, missing one eyeball, blood dripping from his mouth, and a large gaping hole in the wall behind him. After this violent image flashes across the screen, it fades to black, silence filling the speakers. The viewers immediately took the VHS tape out of the VCR and examined it. They hoped that whoever had created the tape had left some clue behind as to who it was. Upon further inspection, they discovered that someone had written over the tape mere minutes before the viewing party began, meaning there could only be a couple of options for who had done it. One, they're in a secured building. It's an animation studio in the entertainment capital of the world. You can't just walk through security. It must have been someone in the building. Two, whoever did it had to have access to the tape and the equipment needed to override the episode, meaning it had to be someone from their creative or production team. 3. The photos of real unalive children were an incredibly serious matter. They looked as though they were taken from someone's personal camera. It was very possible that those children were unalived by someone in the room with them. Sadly, there wasn't much evidence they could gather from the physical tape itself. There weren't any physical markers to identify the suspect. After examining the tape, everyone who was in the room was questioned. Unfortunately, every single person had a watertight alibi. No one who was there for the premiere could have done it. Unsurprisingly, the tape was tossed into a garbage bag and thrown away. The company couldn't risk this ever seeing the light of day. Imagine if it accidentally aired somehow. Everyone would lose their jobs, and it would cost the network big bucks. Oddly enough, no one thought to destroy the tape. Sure, you can throw it away, but if the tape itself is still intact, who knows what could happen to it? It wasn't until 15 years later that the lost tape would be discovered again. In August of 2019, a man named Sam Brown was scavenging through a plastic and scrap yard in California. While there, he discovered a bag buried in the ground containing, you guessed it, the lost VHS tape. For the curious type, when you find a buried VHS tape, your curiosity starts running wild. Sam wanted to know what secrets, if any, were contained on the tape. And boy, did he find them. He brought the tape back from the scrapyard and placed it into his VCR. Luckily for him, he still owned one. Since the tape was buried deep in the ground, it was covered in dirt and needed to be cleaned. This was tricky for Sam, as he didn't want to ruin any of the film. Then he slid the VHS into the VCR. At first, all that he could see on the screen was black and white static. He was determined to see something, anything. Just then, a brief flash of a child appeared on screen. The child looked as though it was unconscious, but he couldn't be certain. Maybe the static was playing tricks on him? But then he heard muffled sounds of people talking, Morse code, a faint piano, and singing. Still, the TV was covered in static and no other images. He decided to take out the tape, wait, and try again. This time, when he started the tape, the image was slightly clearer, but low brightness and faint static on top. There wasn't much to see. Since the image was slowly getting better, he decided to remove the tape again, wait, and try watching it for the third time. The third watch was even clearer, but not perfect. This time, he could only see outlines of characters or shapes, unaware of what they were supposed to be. I assume he didn't even realize that it was a cartoon. He repeated the process again, taking out the tape, waiting, and trying again. Each time he did, the image grew brighter, more colorful, and a bit clearer. On his fourth try, the screen kept bouncing from high colors to black. His fifth, the tape started much clearer visually, but the sound was horrible. It was filled with high-pitched screeches, a foreign language, and eventually cut out before the clarinet concert scene. He tried again. This time, his sixth try. During this viewing, it ran past the concert scene, but the music was distorted. He saw Squidward play the clarinet, the audience react, the bloodshot eyes, and after this, the tape cut out. At this point, Sam was intrigued. What the hell had he just seen? And why did the tape keep cutting out? What was it trying to hide? He decided to try again, his seventh attempt to view the tape in full. This time, however, it skipped the entire first portion of the episode and cut right to Squidward sobbing on his bed, red eyes bleeding. The brightness of the picture was low, the colors off, and static still clinging to the screen. The tape abruptly ended just before the final scene. Sam wanted to know more. His final try, he popped the tape in and the picture was clear as day. It started from the top of the tape and played all the way through. There isn't much information on what happened to Sam after he watched the tape, but from what I can imagine, he probably destroyed it. This time for real. What I find so sad is that multiple people on the creative and production team were affected after watching the tampered with episode. 2 people were rushed to the hospital during the viewing. They couldn't cope with the disturbing images they had seen. There were 3 interns in the viewing room who saw everything as well. 2 of them were left with trauma, and 1 intern even took his own life. One of the editors ended up quitting his job and leaving the company after the viewing party. But the photos, who were those children? Were they dead or alive? Who was responsible? Come to find out, an animator who worked on the episode was found guilty of murder. 2 of the victims were used as images for the disturbing video. He had taken the lives of at least 9 people. And there is the possibility that this is just a scary, creepypasta story and not something more sinister. And with details like this, one could almost believe that the story is real. But thankfully, the episode and the story are not real. The story was created nearly a decade ago by an anonymous user on 7chan under a paranormal forum where people can write and upload their original scary stories. The original poster took on the persona of a Nickelodeon employee who supposedly watched the episode. From there, hundreds of thousands of people read that story and created visuals to go along with it, even editing together pieces of past episodes to create fan-made versions of the lost VHS tape. The most recognizable image created for this fake story is an image of Squidward with those terrifying black and red eyes, staring directly into your soul. The creators of SpongeBob were well aware of the popularity of this creepypasta and decided to reference it in an actual real episode of the show called SpongeBob in Random Land. In the episode, SpongeBob and Squidward are met with a wall of doors opening to different worlds. The last door that Squidward opens shows his bedroom, then quickly cuts to that image of him with red and black eyes and TV static. For lovers of the show and the creepypasta, this is a fun, although a little scary, Easter egg. It's such a captivating story, right? Real or fake. I know for a fact if I heard this story as a kid and went searching for it, I would have been absolutely petrified. But hey, who knows? Maybe when you go to wash your face tonight and look up, you might see Squidward's eyes staring back at you. Dun dun dun! And that, my lovely friends, is the end of today's episode. Until next time, I'm Brandy, and this is Conspiracy Central.